Thanks for tuning in to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about one of the nutrients that probably doesn't get nearly enough attention. It is important, but we only need a tiny little bit of molybdenum. We'll talk about how to get it out there for your crop and what it does.
There are a couple of what we would consider newer diseases in corn that we want to focus on as well today. It's tar spot and physoderma. Will tell you what you need to know about these two tough diseases.
Well, if those diseases just took out our weed of the week, we'd be set, but since they don't, we'll show you how to control this week's weed. We've got an iron talk as well, but first, here's our farm basics.
These days, it can be hard to make the math work in your soybean fields. With the LibertyLink system with Liberty herbicide, it gets easier. A 2+ bushel per acre advantage over Asgrow Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans means at least $18 more an acre for you. Plus, lower system input costs and more complete weed control all adds up to at least $33 more an acre for your farm. That's smart math. Grow smart with BASF.
One question we commonly get from non-farmers is, how come some farmers leave a few rows of corn standing in certain fields?
Well, Brian, this year there's kind of an unusual reason why there are some corn rows still out there that normally aren't. Well, it's because it was too wet in those parts of the fields. And you see it, especially if the field slopes down and a farmer left some rows in the lowest part of the field, he may not have been able to get in there and get them with the combine. We saw a lot of combines getting stuck trying to harvest that low-lying corn ground, so you may see some rows in those areas.
A lot of times we'll see corn rows left near roads, kind of set back a little bit into the field, but near roads as a snow break. A lot of times if we get record amounts of snow, you're going to find that snow piling up on the roads, and the thought is the farmer figures, well, you know what, if I can hold more in my field, number one, I've got that moisture in my field, which I would kind of like. And if I can keep the snow off the road, it's less plowing either I or someone else has to do. And hopefully I can make it to town now because I have less snow on the road.
Well, that certainly can be, and you will see big drifts of snow getting caught by those rows of corn that are still left in fields. Now, the other reason that farmers will leave rows of corn out in fields, well, it's kind of twofold. It all involves wildlife, and it's either to give some food to the wildlife just to make sure they can find some food through the winter. There are certainly some farmers that do that with no intention of hunting or anything else, just strictly, you know, I'm going to leave some food out there for the deer and raccoons and whatever animals are in the area. But the other thing may be for the sportsman who says, you know, I want to do some hunting and I'm going to leave some rows of corn out there because I know the animals will draw into the corn and then I'll have something to hunt. So there could be a couple of different purposes around wildlife.
Yep, so there are a number of reasons why a farmer might leave a few rows of corn out in the field. It's not something we're typically going to do on our farm either, but you know what, in the right situation, again, could be wildlife, could be, oh, it was too wet to harvest, maybe it's just as a snow break. In the right situation, it does fit for many different farmers.
Well, one reason farmers will not leave corn out in the field is to control our weed of the week. We'll show you what will stop this weed later in the show. How can you cut farm expenses in 2019 and still yield well? Which input expenses are just that, expenses? And which inputs will give you great weed, insect, and disease control and give you a great return on your investment? These are big questions this season, and we'll answer them at the free Ag PhD 101 Ways to Cut Farm Expenses workshops. We'll take a close look at every kind of farm expense. So if saving money is important to you, come to Ag PhD's 101 Ways to Cut Farm Expenses workshops. Registration is now open at agphd.com.
Invisible, invasive, underestimated. Nematodes are stealing over 10% of yields, and current protection methods aren't enough. But a breakthrough seed treatment technology controls nematodes when they attack. Now offering NemaStrike technology. It provides broad spectrum control from the start and stays in the root zone as plants grow. Take back your bushels with NemaStrike technology. Strike where nematodes attack.
Leading the charge in strip tillage for more than a decade, the Soil Warrior brings the future to your farm today.
started utilizing the Dual React system this year, you can adjust your speed and it automatically adjusts your sprayer tips. So you can slow down and you aren't building up huge droplets, or you can speed up and you're not throwing a mist that's drifting.
Hypro, helping you spray better.
And how about the big man, Pro Germinator?
Yeah, this guy's got some experience in the field. But look at his stats. You can't argue with those kind of results.
You're right. I know a lot of teams wishing their phosphorus player had those kind of numbers.
Right, but this guy's not just phosphorus. He's got the nitrogen, the potassium, the micros. All those just add up to his phosphorus game.
And his game is good.
Are you looking for an easy way to apply dry powdered products to your stored grain? Do you want to use the applicator recommended by industry leaders for products like Diacon D and other dry powder products? Changing Time CT applicators successfully apply a diversity of products quickly, easily, and accurately. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, inoculants, fertilizers, and other dry products. For commercial use or on the farm, you need the applicator industry leaders are using. CT applicators for the changing times.
Over the last few years, we've spent a lot of time here on Ag PhD talking about fertility. One of the nutrients that we haven't discussed much, though, is molybdenum. That's our topic today.
Well, I can see why people don't talk about molybdenum, Brian, because it's the nutrient we probably need the smallest quantity of all the nutrients that we talk about. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need any. We do need just a little bit. And here's the real challenge. If your soil pH is way off, molybdenum availability really becomes challenged. Now, this is especially true in low pH soils. If you've got a pH that's down in the 5s, molybdenum availability is going to be really tough until you get that up closer to 7. Now, as you're doing this, it may just be a lime application that's needed. You might have enough molybdenum out there, it's just not free and available. So putting a lime out there raises the pH, and all of a sudden, all things that were tying up that molybdenum now are held in check, and the molybdenum can be available for your crop.
Now, that's not to say that just fixing your pH is going to do it, because if your soil has no molybdenum, then whatever is there, sure, it's available now, but there isn't anything there. We've run tests on our own farm, and we found levels that are simply non-detectable. So now we've actually started applying some molybdenum. Our concern with applying molybdenum is you can't put on too much. If you look at what the EPA says for heavy metals, they will regulate a maximum application per year of 0.8 pounds of actual molybdenum. That's it, 0.8 pounds. I didn't even realize this till about a year ago, and I said, oh, let's try on some acres a pound. Well, legally, I can't even put that much on. The total in soil for EPA's requirement is, they say, 8 pounds to 16 pounds. That's the maximum you can have in a soil according to the EPA, because it's a heavy metal.
Now, if that doesn't make you just a little bit nervous that, wow, there's limits on how much I can put out there.
Yeah, but there are limits on everything, Darren. I mean, you can look at zinc and you can look at a lot of other metals. Yes, we are limited. It's just the limits are a lot higher. But then again, we need a lot more of some of the other nutrients as opposed to molybdenum.
It just comes back to we need the least amount in terms of pounds of molybdenum of any of the nutrients. So that's the big difference. So you may say, well, if I don't need very much, how am I going to apply it and apply it accurately? There's certainly a lot of different ways to get molybdenum on your crop. Seed treatment usage has been one over the last few years that more farmers have been trying. And again, it's really that fine rate where you've got to get just the right amount, but not too much. And we've had some challenges putting nutrients on the seed in terms of hurting germination or ultimately being a negative factor on yield. So you want to make sure that you don't overdo it, especially if you're going to put it on the seed.
Yes, some of our tests we've run where we get too much molybdenum on it absolutely kills the seed. So in other words, we've hurt germination, we hurt our stand. That may or may not translate to yield loss depending on how much of the stand we actually damaged. But the point is we have to be really careful with it as a seed treatment. If you want to do something as a broadcast application, you certainly can. Just keep your rate relatively low. It could be done either pre-emerge or post-emerge even. We've used some foliar products over the last few years that have had very, very tiny rates of molybdenum, and we have had some response to that, which we should when we test our soil and there's no molybdenum out there. We have to do something, we realize that, because this nutrient is very important, especially with the legume crops, for nodulation. That's probably the #1 area where we see molybdenum importance, is in nitrogen in that plant.
There are a number of different products that contain molybdenum that you can find on the market today. It seems like sodium molybdate is probably one of the more popular ones that has somewhere in the neighborhood of 39% molybdenum in it. So again, you're, like Brian said, you're not putting very much out there if 0.8 of a pound is your maximum rate you can apply.
The big thing we'd encourage you to do is test your soil and test your plants. When it comes to a soil test, we would just tell you, hey, unless you're at least at 1 part per million, you may very well have a molybdenum problem, especially if your pH is low. So get that pH up, have at least 1 part per million of molybdenum out in your soil, and hopefully you'll be in pretty good shape.
Molybdenum certainly is an important nutrient for our crops. We want to make sure that we're monitoring how much we have in our fields and applying some as needed. One other thing that's really important to have a successful crop is controlling our weed of the week. We'll show you how to do just that coming up later in the show.
If you're looking to expand your farm's grain handling, you want everything to be fast and efficient. The Quick Belt from Norwood Sales is your all-around grain handling solution. Our conveyor-based system uses an 18-inch belt and a 10-inch tube, which minimizes seed damage while moving more than 10,000 bushels an hour. That's fast enough to fill a semi in 6 minutes. Plus, our hood is designed to gently direct the flow of grain straight down, keeping your crop in condition. Keep your grain and your farm moving with the Quick Belt from Norwood Sales.
There are 6,272,640 square inches in an acre. We counted. Why? Because we designed the TigerMate 255 field cultivator and 2000 series early riser planter to maximize every single one. So when you create the most level seed bed in the industry and target a nickel size area to plant a seed and never miss, you'll know in high efficiency farming, there's one name to count on: Case IH. Rethink productivity. Learn more at caseih.com/everyinch.
Your planter is the single most important piece of equipment on your farm, because without a uniform stand, you can't reach maximum yield. That's why Harvest International set out to design a planter that takes advantage of the newest innovations in planter technology. Built tough for high speed and integrated with the latest precision enhancements, Harvest International planters ensure every seed you plant today puts more in your bin at harvest. Harvest International, planting the future.
Morton is eager to make the building you've always dreamed of a reality. Visit us online at mortonbuildings.com.
What were the worst pest problems on your farm this year, and what can you do to stop them once and for all? Hi, I'm Darren Hefty with Ag PhD. On Monday, January 14th, on our farm near Baltic, South Dakota, we'll be holding a free Ag PhD Advanced Pest Management Workshop. We'll bring you the most in-depth coverage on how to scout for and control the pests that are keeping you from maximum yields. You'll learn the best ways to solve resistance issues, keep your fields cleaner both now and in the future, and improve your yields immediately with better pest management. Registration is now open at agphd.com.
Today we're going to talk about a couple of diseases we've never really spent much time on here on Ag PhD. It's Physoderma and tar spot.
Well, let's start with the Physoderma, Brian, because if you read some literature online, they'll tell you, well, it really hasn't been a big issue, but here's the problem. Not only are you going to see some issues right where the stalk and the leaf come together. You'll see some spotting
well, it's stalk
showing
rot
up there.
and brown spot, so it's a couple different things.
Yeah, the spots on the plant I'm not as much worried about as the stalk rot portion of Physoderma. And if it infects that plant, normally in that V5, V7, something like that, fairly early in the season, it can end up being a stalk rot issue. And what we see is more of what farmers believe is green snap. And we hear from guys, man, I got some green snap out there, and then they find out, oh no, there was Physoderma involved in this, and you don't normally see that brown spotting on the outside of the plant, you just see that weakened node, and you're walking through fields and you can just snap those plants right off. And most farmers think, well, that's just a certain growth stage, and it is to some degree, but if there's Physoderma involved, it can be much worse.
This is kind of an interesting disease because these spores can move around, and actually you can find this disease swimming around in water. It's much worse when we have wetter conditions. So like this past year, when a lot of areas were very wet in June, that's why we saw more incidents of Physoderma in 2018 than normal. So if you're going to treat for this, you certainly can. There are many fungicides that are acceptable on Physoderma. It's just you got to make sure you have the timing right. You got to spray early. So, well, most people want to wait until, let's say, R1 in corn, basically silking in corn, to spray fungicide. It's probably already too late for Physoderma. Physoderma, you'd probably want to spray early in that V6, V7 kind of timing just to get an early shot, and then you may need to spray again later on, but that early timing is what we're most concerned about with this particular disease.
With tar spot, this is a disease that's been talked about really since 2015. We've seen a little bit of tar spot in the country. It hasn't gone to huge proportions yet where it's all across the Corn Belt, but it's in a big enough area here that farmers are really starting to get concerned about it. A couple of things that I'll mention with tar spot. We haven't found any hybrids that are completely resistant to it, but in corn breeder trials this summer, one of the things that we would see is some hybrids would really hold up pretty well and not have a whole lot of tar spot. Others would just be loaded. And so there are certainly some hybrids that are highly susceptible, and there are some that are more tolerant. So this is something to talk to your seed provider about. Say, hey, how did you hold up against tar spot last year? What did you see? And pick the hybrids that have a little bit more tolerance. The other thing is we did start to see fungicides getting labels for tar spot. One of them in particular, Delaro, was kind of interesting because right on the label it'll tell you, yep, we can help control tar spot, but we need to retreat every 7 to 14 days as long as those tar spot infections keep showing up. So it's one of those things where yes, we can help it with fungicides. We'll definitely see less tar spot, but we've got to be out there quite often to really keep it off our plants.
Darren mentioned the importance of variety selection with tar spot. The same is true with Physoderma. The big thing that I would say, though, is unfortunately a lot of these new varieties haven't been tested for very many years prior to their release. So sometimes the information that the breeder has is great, and other times it's a little subpar because we haven't seen it on a big scale for a lot of years. But either way, it's very common for many seed dealers to not be fully up to speed on both tar spot and Physoderma. So when you're talking to your seed dealer, the big thing I wanted to stress is talk to them early and say, hey, go back to your company, go back to your breeders, and find out from me what are the best hybrids on these couple of diseases.
And also crop rotation. Think about that going into next year. If you're going to be continuous corn and you had an issue with one of these diseases, you're taking more risk. If you're in a crop rotation with soybeans, for example, it's not like you aren't going to have any of those two diseases, but you're less likely to have a great big problem.
Well, once again, both of these are fungal diseases. You absolutely can control them with a fungicide. Just always keep in mind fungicides are not going to move well in the plant at all. They're not systemic. So when you spray a fungicide, you have to get really good coverage. You want to make sure that you're spraying multiple times if you're worried about the disease coming in early, if you're worried about the disease coming in late. Obviously, crop rotation is going to help because with almost any fungal disease, if you can avoid having where that disease has been in the past, you don't have as much incidence. So use your crop rotation when possible. And again, the most important thing is variety selection.
Stopping diseases on your farm is really critical to getting good yields. So is stopping our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to do that coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is brought to you by Corteva Agriscience, Agriculture Division of Dow DuPont. Finish the fight against tough weeds with the Enlist Weed Control System.
Weeds are tough, but we're tougher. With unrivaled weed control, reduced drift, and near zero volatility. So, who's tough now?
Our weed of the week is Devil's Beggar Tick.
Oh, I love this name, Devil's Beggar Tick, but I also hear farmers say some different names, of which I can mention on air. I don't have to say them off to the side. Stick tight is one. I've had a couple questions. What do you do for stick tight? I'm like, that's a great question. I'm not exactly sure what you're referring to, but they're referring to Devil's Beggar Tick. I've also heard Devil's Pitchfork, and when I hear that, okay, that makes sense because the seed on Devil's Beggar Tick is shaped like a pitchfork. So it's kind of an interesting seed shape, but you know why it is. Just think about nature. What's it going to do? As animals brush by, that pitchfork-shaped seed is going to catch really easily on their fur or on your clothing or anything that runs through the field, and all of a sudden it gets spread. So it's kind of a natural way for the weed to spread its seed.
The good news here is Devil's Beggar Tick is only an annual weed. So if you can just stop it from going to seed, you should be in good shape in the long run. Now, if you're trying to identify this weed, Darren already described the seed. I would just say the weed in general may look a little like poison ivy. So you're going to be scared when you see the weed at first glance either way, especially if you start thinking it's poison ivy. But anyway, again, this is an annual weed, so we can get it under control. We've got both pre and post methods in just about every crop.
All right, let's talk about wheat first of all. And wheat, we're looking at sharpened down pre. And I realize a lot of farmers will say, oh, what are you talking about, a pre and wheat? I don't need to use that. If you've got a tough broadleaf weed, take 2 shots at it. It might get too big and you might have pretty thick wheat out there and have a tough time getting coverage on it later on. So get that pre out early. And if broadleaves are your concern, Sharpen's a great pre to use in wheat. Now I know we talk sometimes don't use Sharpen in front of soybeans for a few different reasons, but we love it in front of wheat. You can use a couple ounces and just wipe out most of the broadleaves. Then you come back post-emerge either with a strong rate of Husky or use Wide Match plus Affinity Broadspec.
Okay, in corn, lots of options here. I'd start with Verdict, that'd be my preference. You could also use one of the HPPDs or Sure Start, something like that. Post-emerge, our favorite product is Status.
All right, in soybeans, we use the 3 pre strategy. So if you're in no-till, we start with Prowl. If you're in conventional till, we'd start with Treflan. And then we'd mix in one of the PPOs, either Valor or Authority, in either program. And then we'd also use some Metribuzin if you can. Now with Metribuzin, you have to watch out if you've got a pH above 7.4 or if you've got soil that tends to be a little more sandy, you'll have to cut the rate back on Metribuzin, but it will be highly effective for you. So use those 3 pre's, you wipe out most of the Devil's Beggar Tick, then come back post-emerge. My favorite options are Roundup, Liberty, and Extend. Those are awesome, but if you don't have those tools in your tool belt, well, you could use something like Basagran on a hot day with crop oil. You could mix in some Classic with it if soil pH allows, and you can still do a pretty decent job on this weed.
All right, if you've got this weed in pastures, lots of options there. Distinct is probably our preference.
So watch out for Devil's Beggar Tick with the pitchfork-shaped seed so it doesn't catch on you or anything running through your field and spread. That's all the time we have for this week's weed, but Iron Talk is coming up next.
Out here, great yield starts with great weed control. That's why I choose the Roundup Ready Extend crop system, the system that makes the difference, because only I know what it takes out here. Yield's what it's all for. But keeping my fields clean all season, that's what it's all about. This is my field.
Farmers across the country have put their confidence in the Roundup Ready Extend crop system. These are their experiences.
The RR2X soybeans have really met our yield expectations.
We used to be 45 to 50 bushels. Now we're setting a bar at 60, 70 bushels.
We sprayed our field correctly, and we're keeping that money in the field.
In 2019, we definitely will be 100% Roundup Ready to Extend soybeans.
Fertility is one of the biggest expenses on your farm, but is that money being put to its best use? What is your fertilizer dealer not telling you? Hi, I'm Darren Hefty with Ag PhD. Are you getting sold products that don't make you money? Are you depleting your soil and heading for disaster? We'll answer all these questions and more at the Ag PhD workshop called What Your Fertilizer Dealer Won't Tell You. Fertilizer may be your biggest expense, but to turn it into an investment, find out how at our workshop Tuesday, January 15th on our farm near Baltic, South Dakota. Registration is now open at agphd.com.
This Agro Liquid line is something special. a lot of really impressive playmakers. Take a look at Sure K. This guy is an enigma.
But wrap your head around the exceptionally high plant response when compared to conventional potassium sources, the research-proven plant availability, plus flexible application options and mixing capabilities.
Really stellar performance stats. Sure K is a true standout, and that's a winning goal on any field.
At Estes Performance Concaves, we know how valuable your time is at harvest. That's why we designed the new XPR concave system. The XPR system is the #1 performance concave system on the market, surpassing the rest in both speed and efficiency, ensuring every last grain from your field gets into your tank. Plus, XPR concaves work for all row crops. No more changing concaves, meaning you have less downtime. Take back your bushels this harvest. Get Estes Performance Concaves in your combine today.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
There are 6,272,640 square inches in an acre. We counted. Why? Because we designed the TigerMate 255 field cultivator and 2000 series early riser planter to maximize every single one. So when you create the most level seed bed in the industry and target a nickel-size area to plant a seed and never miss, you'll know in high-efficiency farming, there's one name to count on. Case IH. Rethink productivity. Learn more at caseih.com/everyinch.
Two things were a given growing up on the farm during the wintertime. There would be livestock to take care of and snow that stood in the way. Getting equipment started was a challenge when it was so cold, and one of the key things that we needed to learn about was how batteries worked, so I'll share some of that in today's Iron Talk. They say a good battery should last 5 or even 8 years with proper care and operation. Here are a few tips when selecting and caring for your batteries. First, test the batteries you have before they fail. On our farm, that's always meant right before harvest, right before the cold of winter, and ahead of planting time. If a battery won't hold a full charge, replace it. Next, when you're choosing a battery, get one that fits the way you'll use it. Let's face it, you're operating off-road, so pick a battery specifically built to handle that type of operation. All the bouncing around of driving through a pasture, a crop field, or just down a gravel road takes a toll on a battery. Keep your batteries clean. A damp rag is generally sufficient to wipe off acid and junk that can cause a battery to run out of power more quickly. Keep batteries filled to recommended levels with distilled water. Another big thing is to disconnect batteries when they're not in use. Some farmers have had good luck using a trickle charger or a maintenance charger to keep batteries full of juice and ready to go, but keep in mind these are two different things. With the trickle charger, you still need to unhook it to avoid overcharging. The maintenance charger is almost a hook the battery up and forget it kind of thing. So use caution with either of these chargers and strictly follow the manufacturer's recommendations for use. Take care of your battery, and it will take care of you this winter and throughout the season. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
We hope you've enjoyed our show today. If you're looking for more agronomic information, we'd encourage you to subscribe to the Ag PhD magazine. Just go to agphdinsider.com to learn more.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.